What do you prioritize the most in your teaching? And does that show through in how you teach? A lot of us may have heard the phrase, do as I say, not as I do, right? And I think we know that that's not how we want to teach. But sometimes that is the message that we try to send across, and it's not going to land. So, what is it in your lessons that's bleeding through into your student's brain about what you actually value as a teacher? What really matters? Because we can say things till we're blue in the face, but it's actions that speak louder than words. So here's the first question I want you to ask yourself. What's the first thing you practice together? Meaning when your student and yourself, when you're in a lesson and you open up a piece, say a piece they've been working on or a new piece, what is the first thing you have them do? What is the practice step you take together? Do you have them sight read it right away? Do you have them show you how they practiced it, if it's a returning piece? Or do you have them do something specific, like clap out the rhythm, say all the note names, say the intervals, say the finger numbers? What do you ask for first? Most commonly, I know it varies, and it should vary. Maybe it doesn't for you, depending on your different teaching styles, right? But I would love to hear what comes first for you, because I think so often we just default to something that we think is the normal way to start a piece, or we default to just having them play through it, even if we know a student hasn't practiced much, or even if it's new. And that's not always sending the right message, is it? I like to think of students sometimes as going on a little rhythm quarantine, or an oral quarantine. Now, I know that word isn't the best at the moment, but that's how I always thought of it before, so I haven't come up with a better one. But what I mean by that is, if I know a student is struggling with rhythm, we do rhythm first for every piece, no matter what. If you've been practicing it before, if you have never seen it before, if it's long, if it's short, if it's hands together, if it's separate, we do the rhythm first. And if we keep doing that, students start to see, oh, the rhythm comes first. The rhythm is what she values the most. And that bleeds through into how they play and what they prioritize in their own playing. So here's the next question I want you to ask yourself. Where do you ask them to start? Many of us talk about that start again syndrome, as I call it in my book, about the piano practice physician. But where do you ask your students to start in lessons? Is it always the beginning? And then later, do you complain when students always know the beginning better than the end and tell them that they should be practicing different parts of the piece, not always from the beginning? Well, if you always start at the start when you're together, what do you expect? Not to be harsh, but look back at it yourself, replay it in your head, and ask yourself, are we starting in different spots? Are we doing different things? Or are we always starting from the start? Because what you do in the lesson should be an example of what should happen in practice. Here's your next question. What do you consistently correct? This is something I had to train myself very carefully to do when I started realizing that I wanted to prioritize intervals over note names. I used to, as a beginning teacher, I would often listen to the piece, and as I was listening, if they played a wrong note, I would tell them what it was. Like they would literally be playing and I'd say F sharp, G, or whatever came up. No, that's a something. Have you ever done that? I know I'm probably not alone there. And I still think sometimes that might be the appropriate response. But one of the first things I trained myself to do when I started thinking about this intervallic approach and trying to move my own thinking was to train myself that when I'm correcting, I should say, oh, that's a third, not, oh, that's an A, so that I'm emphasizing how they should be thinking about it. Because if I'm teaching them to read by interval, and then I say, oh, that's an A, I'm making their brain switch to another track, right? Brain train, onto another track. And that's not extremely helpful for their learning. But even more than that, if I'm correcting something during their playing, and this is something I've seen a lot with the teachers in my studio right now, I've been talking to them and they've been realizing themselves about always correcting notes, but not correcting rhythm, letting the rhythm slide. They don't stop a student or interrupt them when they get the rhythm wrong. They just think that's the next layer. But they do correct a wrong note. Whereas I've worked really hard to train myself to do the opposite. I will insist on the right rhythm. This is most of the time. Of course, nothing is ever a blanket statement, but I will insist most of the time on the right rhythm over the correct notes. Because I want to teach my students that you keep going, you keep that train moving, you stay on time more than you correct notes as you go. Wrong notes don't matter nearly as much as playing with a steady pulse the whole way through the piece. So, what do you consistently correct? And is it the thing you want students to prioritize at that time? Which piece gets the most time? Sometimes we get stuck on pieces during a lesson that we actually don't want students to prioritize, or we get stuck on a part of a piece that we don't want them to prioritize in their practice. So in any lesson, try to, without keeping a time clock or anything like that, try to roughly guesstimate how much time did I spend on this piece or that piece, or other things like scales or sight reading or anything else you're fitting into the lesson. How much time did I give it? How much is that as a percentage of the lesson? And does that feel right to me? And this is a gut feeling. This isn't about really doing detailed analysis and having this perfect division of your lesson. I'm not that delusional. I know we can't do that. But you can look back and say, did I just go down a rabbit hole there? Did I just get so fixated on one thing that they couldn't get because they kept not getting it, when I should have moved on and prioritized something else and made a better plan during the week to come back to that thing because they weren't getting it anyway? What do you make time for every week? This is a big one for many of us. And many teachers will say that they want to do more of X or Y. But here's the thing, you have to give up something else. So is that really a priority for you or not? If you want to do more work on solfa singing, well, super. But you have to make time from something else. You have to take away time from something else, unless you're going to increase your lesson lengths, and I thoroughly encourage you to do that, but possibly not mid-year. So if you're going to work with the time you already have, and you want to increase your solfa singing time from 0 to 2 minutes, where's that 2 minutes going to come from? Is it going to come from a piece? Do you value scales less than the time they're actually taking in the lessons? And how could you cut that time shorter? What do you make time for every week? And is it the things that align with your teaching values and your goals for your students? And finally, how do you react when you make a mistake? This is one I didn't catch myself until maybe last year or the year before. And I started trying to train myself not to apologize when I play a wrong note or when I muddle something up, to try to demonstrate an attitude of, I gave it a go. Not that I make mistakes all the time or don't care about my own playing, but if I'm playing a duet with my student, I don't want to set an example that we go back when I lose my place or miss a note or something. If I'm sight reading it, I want to set an example that I keep going no matter what. I've been working on this a lot, and particularly it came into effect with the Joy of Christmas book, which is from Piano Safari. If anyone has used it, they'll know that Jingle Bell Jazz is not an easy duet. So pieces like that are where it comes into its own. And yeah, sometimes I have to keep one hand going while I figure out where the student is, while also trying to dissect my piece when a student is going back and forth. But I've made a point to keep going. And to, when I finished, and my student is being hard on themselves, to point out that, oh, well, did you notice I just didn't play the right hand of this whole chunk here? That's because I wanted to keep going no matter what and stay with you and just enjoy whatever music we could make, even though I couldn't figure out that chord in that exact moment. So what example are you setting when you make a mistake? When you miss something? Yes, we take responsibility for things that affect other people, but we shouldn't be apologizing and demonstrating behaviors that we don't want to see in our students. So when it comes to teaching priorities, I do think that your actions, the way you teach, speaks much louder than what you tell your students. And I want you to consider all of those questions, or at least one of them. Take one of them, right? Just do one thing. As we often say here, J-dot. Just do one thing. So take one of those questions, whichever one hit home for you the most, or you feel you could take action on this week. Take it and see if you can prioritize in a new way that's going to be closer aligned with your philosophies as a teacher, with how you want to teach and how you want students to see their music, their lessons, or their performances.